And without further ado, I'm going to ask Alberto to come to the podium.
Thank you, Ali, for the introduction. I have to say that many of you probably expected Jasjit Sekon to be here today instead of me. We were very excited to have him here. Unfortunately, he had to cancel at the very last minute. My colleagues promptly deputized me to make a few remarks on how the digital economy and big data and machine learning are changing the social science and also data-driven policy making. So I'm basically going to talk about three changes. The first one is about the changes in the nature of the question that the social science researchers are interested about. There will be another two changes. One is changes in the nature of the data, and this will be very much related to this idea that we have about big data. And the third one is is going to be a big change also in the type of analytical machinery that we are using for doing our analysis. Okay, so let's go for it. So first, I will talk about some changes that we have recently in the type of questions that we're interested in the social sciences. Like with the arrival of the digital economy, the nature of the social and economic interactions have changed dramatically, and much of economic activity that we have now in labor markets, in retail, and in financial markets, and basically any other type of economic activity, happens or takes place now, through digital platforms and automated systems. Understanding these changes and their effects is a big deal now in the social sciences. And if you want some evidence about that, you can see that there is quite a lot of recent interest in issues like algorithmic fairness and digital privacy in economics or in the social sciences, things like e-commerce and how this affects the activity of regulatory agencies, or about the propagation of information, or perhaps most often misinformation through digital platforms. Okay, so so social scientists now are thinking about some questions that were not so much in our radar before. And with this change in the type of questions that we are considering, this is also associated with a change in the type of data that we use. For many years, empirical research in economics was made possible by the existence of survey data, and in particular by large labor market surveys, like the current population survey or the survey of income and program participations. These are labor market surveys of they include tens of thousands of people, and they are used for things like calculating the unemployment rate or the labor market participation rates. Okay, so these are great data sets in many dimensions, but they also have quite a lot of problems. One of the problems that they have is that the sample sizes they are going to be smaller than the other data sets and the other type of data that we will talk about later. But also there is a lot of mismeasurement in the data. There is a lot of data that is not available. For example, a kind of a dirty secret in the social sciences is that in the current population survey, more than 35% of the individuals fail to report data on income or wages. So that makes it very difficult to use this data set to answer important questions like the evolution of income inequality or the evolution in the gender gap in wages. Okay, and for this reason, many economists, or some economists, not many, for one reason that I will explain later, and social scientists, they are turning their attention to administrative data. These are the data records from IRS and the Social Security, and these are really large databases, and they have very detailed information about the individuals. But there are the two issues with this type of data. The first one is that it is very difficult to access, right? Because of data security and confidentiality issues, only a few researchers in fact, can, can access this data. The second one is that this type of data is very good in terms of, the granularity of the information for each particular individual, but it's not that good in, describing how each individual, how the individual interact. Okay, and because of that, more and more people are thinking about, exploiting this new data environment that they have come to be known as big data. Okay, so and what is big data? I guess that there are different definitions. If you go, I went to Wikipedia, and if you go to Wikipedia and look at what big data is, this says big data basically says big data is data that is big. Okay, and of course, for a social science researcher like me, that's not super exciting. Okay, but perhaps we can think about big data in a slightly different way from a social science perspective, and you can think about it as an environment with three components. The first one is a large amount of data that are collected by computers and automated systems, and this data on complex social systems and other information. At the same time, we have powerful computing capabilities that allow us to process this data in short time. And oftentimes, we can use the same automated systems that are collecting the data to deploy personalized, sophisticated policy intervention. Okay, so in many ways, this big data environment are solving many of the problems that we were talking about before, especially the one about having information about how individuals relate to each other, how they interact. And the availability of this big data environments is motivating a question that is going to define data-driven policy analysis for the next decade, is that how can we use this large amount of data and vast computing capabilities to make governments operate more effectively and more efficiently. Okay, and that's part of what my research is about, and the research of many of my colleagues. Okay, if you want to think about some applications of these ideas, we have some here, for example, Transport for London uses large data set collected in real time by automated systems to improve the effectiveness of a London public transportation system. The Financial Industry Regulatory Agency, each day analyzes very large number of transactions in order to detect insider trading and regulatory non-compliance. And of course, the analysis of large unstructured data sets is an integral part of what they do at the national security intelligence agencies and people who care about things like electoral politics. Okay. I said that the last component that I wanted to mention as part of the changes that are happening in the social sciences is about analytical tools. If you go now to the Department of Economics, where I teach, and see what the students are learning and they care about, and much of what they do is studying things like high-dimensional statistics, machine learning, causal inference methods, large-scale optimization, control theory, and network science. Okay, and perhaps if you see this list, you think, well, perhaps it's what the people do at the Department of Computer Science, but they also do it at the Department of Economics. Probably they do very similar things at the Department of Statistics. Okay. So I want to finish this with a little bit of provocative thought, and this is going to be about automated policy making. So here is the idea for you to think about. If in some years we are going to say that driving our cars is too complicated and too important to be left to you humans, and we are going to allow computers to drive our cars, why should we leave policy making for humans? It's not that clear. Perhaps monetary policy may be too complicated and too important to be left to humans. Okay, so here it's kind of a provocative thought for you. And in case you think that this is kind of science fiction and we are not going to arrive here, I have at least one example of this. And this is a storm barrier in the Netherlands. The Dutch people are great doing this type of things, and it's protecting the port of Rotterdam. And what is special about this structure is that it's completely in principle, I guess that there is a red button somewhere, but it's completely like operated by a computer. So like the computer has like some information about the weather, some information about the level of the sea, and if the computer predicts that in Rotterdam the level of the water is going to increase like 3 meters above the usual level, the computer automatically closes the harbor. Okay, and if you think this is genius, you think about this genius because it avoids the whole, political process of, there are many people who are going to lose for the closing, many people who are going to win. A computer does it. Humans are not involved. Okay, so perhaps we have a little bit more of that in the future. We can think about it. And I'm not saying that it's good or bad, by the way. It's just there. Okay, so let me just summarize what I said. Like much of the, current economic activity and social activity more general takes place through digital platforms and automated systems, and the availability of the data that are collected in these automated systems represent a great challenge and also a great opportunity for policy making. And policy research, the policy research that we do at the Department of Social Sciences and the practices are going to be transformed by these new realities in the next decades. Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks.